General Alex Carter stood in the command center of the human military base hidden inside an asteroid field and watched as reports came in from battles across the galaxy. The humans were winning fights that the Council thought would be easy victories, and Alex knew why. For 50 years, humans had been planning for this war while pretending to be simple miners and laborers. Chief Engineer Sam Rodriguez worked day and night in the secret weapons facility that humans had built beneath the mining colonies on Europa. Sam had spent 20 years developing technologies that the Council had never seen, and now it was time to show the galaxy what human engineering could accomplish. The quantum disruption drive was ready for its first combat test. Captain Nina Brooks flew her fighter through the debris field left after the Battle of Wolf 359, where human forces had destroyed an entire Council patrol fleet. Nina led the Ghost Squadron, which used new stealth technology that made human ships invisible to Council sensors. The Zephyrians had never faced an enemy they could not see, and their panic was spreading through their ranks. Director Paul Henderson received intelligence reports from human agents who had been placed in Council governments decades ago. The Council had thought humans were too primitive for espionage, but Paul had been running spy networks since before the rebellion began. His agents were now turning minor species against the Council by showing them evidence of Zephyrian corruption and lies. The first major battle of the war happened at Vega Prime, where a Council fleet of 200 ships attacked a human colony. General Carter had only 30 ships to defend the system, but the human vessels were equipped with technology the Council had never encountered. The quantum disruption drive allowed human ships to phase through enemy shields and appear inside their defensive formations. Sam Rodriguez watched from the command ship as the new weapon systems performed beyond all expectations. Human torpedoes passed through Zephyrian armor like it was made of paper, and human fighters moved through space in ways that broke the known laws of physics. The Council fleet was destroyed completely, while the humans lost only 3 ships. Dr. Lisa Grant worked with the resistance scientists to study the artifact that had started the war. The black cube contained information about locations throughout the galaxy, and Lisa realized it was some kind of map or navigation system. The symbols on its surface matched markings found at archaeological sites that the Council had claimed to discover. Nina Brooks led her squadron on a raid against the Council supply depot at Rigel Station. The human fighters appeared from nowhere and destroyed the facility before the defenders could respond. Nina's pilots moved like ghosts through space and struck without warning before vanishing again. The Council forces began to fear attacks that could come from anywhere at any time. The war spread to dozens of systems as more species learned the truth about human capabilities. Director Henderson's propaganda network showed footage of human technological superiority and Council brutality toward innocent colonists. Several minor species declared neutrality, while others began secretly supporting the human cause. General Carter planned the next phase of the campaign from his mobile command center aboard the battleship New York. The humans would strike at the heart of Council power by attacking their most important military bases simultaneously. The plan required perfect timing and coordination, but Alex knew his people could accomplish what seemed impossible. Chief Engineer Rodriguez unveiled the next generation of human weapons, including plasma cannons that could punch through any known armor and shield generators that could deflect the most powerful Council energy beams. The human war machine was reaching its full potential, and the Council was beginning to realize they had seriously underestimated their former slaves. Admiral Kate Sullivan defected from the Council Navy and brought her fleet of 12 ships to join the human cause. Kate provided intelligence about Council military plans and helped train human officers in space combat tactics. Her defection encouraged other Council officers who had doubts about the war to question their loyalty. The Battle of Altair was where the Council made their last attempt to stop human expansion. They assembled the largest fleet in galactic history, with over 500 warships from a dozen different species. The human force was much smaller, but they had advantages the Council could not understand or counter. Nina Brooks flew reconnaissance missions over the Council fleet and reported their positions to General Carter. The human plan was not to meet the enemy in direct battle, but to use their superior mobility and technology to strike at weak points. The Ghost Squadron would eliminate enemy commanders while the main fleet attacked with new weapons. Dr. Lisa Grant discovered that the artifacts found at various locations were all connected in some way. The symbols and energy signatures matched perfectly, and she began to suspect they were part of a much larger system. Lisa shared her findings with the resistance leadership, but nobody had time to investigate further. While the war was still being fought, the Council fleet attacked the human positions at Altair, expecting to overwhelm them with superior numbers. But the battle went differently than anyone expected. Human ships appeared and disappeared like phantoms while their weapons cut through enemy formations with devastating effect. The Council commanders could not adapt to tactics they had never seen before. Sam Rodriguez personally oversaw the deployment of the experimental gravity weapons that could crush enemy ships like tin cans. The technology was based on human theories about space-time manipulation that other species had dismissed as impossible. The Council learned too late that human science had advanced far beyond what they had been allowed to see. Director Henderson coordinated with resistance cells throughout Council space to launch simultaneous uprisings. Human agents activated sleeper cells and turned loyal species against their Zephyrian overlords. The political structure of the Council began to collapse as member species realized they had been manipulated and controlled. Captain Nina Brooks led the final assault on the Council command ship, where the enemy fleet admiral was directing the U battle. The Ghost Squadron penetrated the ship's defenses, and Nina personally captured the Zephyrian commander, who surrendered rather than face certain death. The loss of their leader caused the entire Council fleet to retreat in disorder. General Carter watched as the enemy fled, and knew that humanity had won more than just a battle. The Council's reputation for invincibility was broken, and their member species were questioning everything they had been told. The war was far from over, but the tide had turned decisively in favor of human freedom. The aftermath of the Battle of Altair saw dozens of species declaring independence from Council rule. The Zephyrian Empire was losing control of its territory as rebellions broke out across the galaxy. Humans found themselves leading a coalition of free worlds that grew larger every day. Dr. Lisa Grant continued her research into the mysterious artifacts and discovered references to something called the Watchers in ancient texts. The symbols on the artifacts seemed to be warnings or instructions, but Lisa could not decode their full meaning. She had a growing feeling that the artifacts were connected to something much more dangerous than the Galactic Council. Jake Morrison commanded one of the human fleets that was liberating former Council colonies. Everywhere he went, Jake found evidence of the Council's crimes against both humans and other species. The rebellion had become something larger than anyone had expected, and Jake wondered if humanity was ready for the responsibility of galactic leadership. Captain Jake Morrison wiped sweat from his forehead as he watched his crew work the mining equipment on Kepler 442b. The red dust of the planet covered everything, and everyone looked tired after 3 months of digging for rare metals that would make the Galactic Council rich while humans got barely enough credits to survive. Jake had been a military officer once, but that was before the Council decided humans were only good for mining and construction work. The drilling machine made a loud noise and stopped working. Jake walked over to see what happened and found his engineer Sam looking confused at the scanner readings. The machine had hit something that was not rock or metal, but something else entirely. Jake looked at the scanner and saw a perfect geometric shape buried 20 feet below the surface. Dr. Lisa Grant was working late at the Council research station when she received the mining report from Kepler 442b. She read about the strange object and felt her heart race with excitement. This could be the discovery that proved humans were capable of more than manual labor. Lisa had been documenting how the Council took credit for human discoveries for years, but nobody would listen to her complaints. The object was pulled from the ground 3 days later, and it was unlike anything anyone had ever seen. It was a perfect black cube about the size of a small building with strange symbols carved into every surface. The symbols seemed to glow with their own light, and the cube hummed with energy that made the hair on everyone's arms stand up. Jake reported the find to Council authorities as required by law, and waited for their response. Commander Ryan Phillips got the message about the discovery while he was meeting with other human resistance leaders in an abandoned warehouse on Earth. Ryan had been planning small acts of rebellion against the Council for years, but he knew humans needed something bigger to unite them. When he heard about the artifact, his eyes lit up with possibility. This could be the spark that started the fire of human independence. Admiral Kate Sullivan received orders to secure the artifact and arrest the mining crew for unauthorized contact with alien technology. Kate had served the council faithfully for 20 years and had earned her rank through skill and dedication. But she felt sick about arresting humans for doing their jobs properly. She knew the real reason for the arrest was that the council could not allow humans to be credited with a major discovery. The council ships arrived at Kepler 442b within hours of Jake's report. Zephyrian soldiers in their blue armor surrounded the mining site and pointed their weapons at the human workers. The lead Zephyrian officer spoke through a translator device and told Jake that his entire crew was under arrest for violating archaeological protocols. Jake protested that they had followed all procedures, but the officer did not care about human words. Lisa watched from her laboratory as news feeds showed human miners being arrested and loaded onto council prison ships. She could not stand it anymore and began copying classified files that showed the truth about human discoveries. The files revealed that humans had found 7 major archaeological sites in the past decade, and the council had taken credit for all of them. Lisa knew she had to get this information to Commander Phillips and the Resistance. The arrest of Jake's crew spread across human colonies like wildfire. Ryan Phillips used his network to share the story and the evidence that Lisa had stolen from the council databases. Humans who had been afraid to speak up before now saw clear proof that they were being cheated and oppressed. The resistance grew from hundreds of members to thousands in just a few days. Admiral Sullivan stood on the bridge of her flagship and watched as human protests broke out on dozens of worlds. She had always told herself that the council treated all species fairly, but the evidence was overwhelming. The council had been lying to everyone about human capabilities and achievements. Kate realized she had to choose between her oath to an unjust system and her loyalty to her own species. First attacks began on the mining stations where humans worked in dangerous conditions for barely enough pay to survive. Ryan Phillips had given orders to target only military and government facilities, but angry humans attacked anything with council symbols. The rebellion that started with one mining crew was spreading across the galaxy faster than anyone had expected. Jake Morrison and his crew were being held in a council prison ship when they heard explosions outside their cells. Human fighters had attacked the ship and freed all the prisoners. Jake found himself face to face with Commander Phillips, who offered him a choice to join the rebellion or return to his family on Earth. Jake looked at his crew and saw the anger in their eyes, and knew there was only one answer he could give. Dr. Lisa Grant transmitted her stolen files to every human colony and news network she could reach before council security found her laboratory. The evidence she provided proved that humans had been systematically cheated, and their achievements stolen for decades. Lisa was arrested, but her sacrifice had given the resistance the proof they needed to justify their actions. Admiral Sullivan received orders to bombard human colonies that were supporting the rebellion, but she could not bring herself to fire on innocent civilians. Instead, she sent a coded message to Commander Phillips, warning him about the planned attacks. Kate knew this made her a traitor to the council, but she also knew it made her loyal to what was right. The rebellion reached its peak when human forces captured the council military base at Proxima Station. The battle was fierce, and many died on both sides, but the humans fought with desperation, while the council forces fought only because they were ordered to. Ryan Phillips broadcast a message from the captured station declaring that humans would no longer serve as slaves to alien masters. The Galactic Council called an emergency session to discuss the human uprising. The Zephyrian delegates demanded immediate military action to crush the rebellion, while other species called for negotiation. The council had not faced a serious challenge to their authority in over 1,000 years, and they were not sure how to respond to human defiance. Jake Morrison stood with his freed crew on the bridge of a captured council warship and looked out at the stars. He had started this chain of events by simply doing his job and reporting a discovery, but now he was part of something much bigger. The artifact they had found was just the beginning, and Jake somehow knew that humanity's greatest challenges still lay ahead in the darkness between the stars. President Ellen Cooper stood before the representatives of 47 species in the Great Assembly Hall on New Geneva. The humans had been elected to lead the new Free Worlds Alliance after the complete collapse of the old Galactic Council. Ellen looked out at the diverse crowd of beings and knew that humanity now carried the responsibility for peace and justice across the galaxy. Ambassador Tony Mitchell worked 18-hour days negotiating with surrendering Council worlds. The Zephyrian Empire was crumbling as more systems declared independence every week. Tony offered generous terms to species that had been forced to serve the Council, but he made it clear that those who had committed crimes against other species would face justice. Colonel Beth Warner governed the captured Zephyrian colonies with a firm but fair hand. The humans could have taken revenge for decades of oppression, but Beth followed orders to treat all civilians with respect. She worked to establish democratic governments on worlds that had never known freedom and found the task more difficult than winning battles. Dr. Kevin Hayes led archaeological teams to dozens of worlds where the mysterious artifacts had been discovered. Kevin found that every major civilization in galactic history had encountered these objects just before reaching their peak development. The pattern was too consistent to be coincidence, and Kevin suspected something was watching and waiting. Last major battle of the war took place at Zephyria Prime, where the Council made their final stand. General Alex Carter led the combined human and allied fleets against the heavily defended homeworld of the Zephyrian Empire. The battle lasted 3 days and ended with the complete surrender of the Council government. Ellen Cooper broadcast a message to the entire galaxy announcing the end of the war and the beginning of a new age of cooperation. She promised that the Free Worlds Alliance would protect the rights of all species and prevent any single group from dominating others. Ellen knew that keeping this promise would be harder than winning the war. Had been Tony Mitchell negotiated the formal treaty that dissolved the Galactic Council and established the new government structure. Representatives from over 60 species signed the document that guaranteed freedom and equality for all civilizations. The ceremony was broadcast across the galaxy and marked the end of 1,000 years of Zephyrian rule. Kevin Hayes made a disturbing discovery while studying artifacts on the former Council capital world. The objects contained data records that showed identical patterns of rise and fall for dozens of previous galactic civilizations. Every advanced society had followed the same path of development before mysteriously disappearing at the height of their power. Colonel Warner reported strange energy readings from monitoring stations throughout former Council space. The stations had been built by unknown beings and were so old that even the Zephyrians had forgotten their original purpose. Beth ordered her teams to investigate, but the technology was beyond anything humans had encountered. Dr. Lisa Grant joined Kevin's research team, and together they decoded more of the artifact symbols. The messages spoke of watchers who had guided galactic development for millions of years. Lisa felt a chill as she realized that humanity's victory over the Council might have been part of some larger plan. President Cooper called an emergency meeting of the Alliance leadership when reports came in about the monitoring stations. The ancient technology was showing signs of activation after being dormant for thousands of years. Ellen ordered a secret investigation to determine if the galaxy faced a new threat. Ambassador Mitchell received disturbing reports from species that had been isolated on the galaxy's rim for centuries. These civilizations spoke of legends about beings that came from the darkness between stars to harvest advanced societies. Tony had dismissed such stories as mythology, but now he began to wonder if they contained truth. Kevin Hayes discovered that the artifacts were actually sophisticated recording devices that had been documenting galactic civilization for eons. The data showed that every 1,000 years or so, a dominant species would rise to control most of the galaxy before vanishing completely. The pattern had repeated dozens of times. Colonel Warner's investigation teams found massive structures hidden in the void between galaxies. The constructions were so large they could be seen from light years away and showed clear signs of recent activity. Beth realized that something had been watching and waiting for humanity to complete their conquest of Council space. Dr. Grant decoded a message from the artifacts that made her blood run cold. The text spoke of a harvest that would begin when the current cycle was complete and the galaxy's dominant species had gathered all others under their control. Lisa understood that the Free Worlds Alliance had unknowingly fulfilled an ancient requirement. Ellen Cooper met with her senior advisors in the most secure facility on Earth to discuss the mounting evidence of an external threat. The president had led humanity to victory over the Council, only to discover that a far more dangerous enemy had been manipulating events from the beginning. Ellen ordered the formation of a secret research division to study the threat. Tony Mitchell contacted the isolated Rim civilizations and learned that several species had encountered the Watchers directly. These beings possessed technology that made human and council weapons look primitive, and they treated younger species as experimental subjects. The Rim dwellers had survived by remaining hidden and avoiding technological advancement. Kevin Hayes found references to the Watchers in the oldest Zephyrian historical records. The texts described visits by beings of pure energy who had guided the early development of Zephyrian society. Kevin realized that every major galactic civilization had been shepherded by these entities until they reached a predetermined level of advancement. Colonel Warner's long-range sensors detected movement in the deep void as massive objects began traveling toward populated space. The structures were the size of small moons and moved through space without any visible means of propulsion. Beth knew that humanity had very little time to prepare for whatever was coming. President Cooper addressed the Free Worlds Alliance about the threat facing all galactic civilization. She revealed the truth about the Watchers and their pattern of harvesting advanced societies throughout history. Ellen called for unity among all species as they faced an enemy that had destroyed countless civilizations before them. Dr. Grant worked frantically to decode the final messages from the artifacts. The last symbol spoke of a way to break the eternal cycle, but the instructions were incomplete and damaged. Lisa knew that the key to survival lay hidden in the ancient data, but time was running out as the Watchers approached. Jake Morrison received orders to take his fleet to the galaxy's edge and observe the approaching threat. Jake had started this chain of events by discovering a simple artifact on a mining world, and now he found himself facing beings that had manipulated galactic history for millions of years. The Free Worlds Alliance began preparations for a war unlike anything they had ever imagined. Humanity had broken the Galactic Council and united dozens of species under the banner of freedom, but their greatest test was yet to come. The Watchers were returning to claim their harvest, and only united action by all galactic civilizations could hope to stop them. Admiral Jack Foster led the deep space exploration fleet toward the galaxy's edge, where massive structures had been detected moving through the void. Jack commanded the most advanced ships humanity had ever built, but he felt small and helpless when he saw the approaching objects. The alien constructions were larger than entire star systems and radiated power that his sensors could barely measure. Dr. Maria Santos worked around the clock in her laboratory studying energy patterns from the approaching structures. The technology was so advanced that human science could barely comprehend what they were seeing. Maria realized that these beings had mastered forces that other species thought were impossible to control. Captain Luke Thompson prepared his first contact team. For the most important mission in galactic history, Luke had negotiated with dozens of alien species during the war, but nothing had prepared him for meeting beings that had existed since before his galaxy was formed. The weight of responsibility pressed down on him as his ship approached the nearest. Watcher Construct General Patricia Adams coordinated the defense of Alliance space as reports came in from across the galaxy. Ancient installations were awakening on hundreds of worlds and releasing energies that disrupted all known technology. Patricia knew that conventional weapons would be useless against enemies who could manipulate the basic laws of physics. First direct contact happened when Luke's ship encountered a Watcher vessel that seemed to be made of crystallized starlight. The alien craft was beautiful and terrible at the same time, and it communicated through methods that bypassed normal language. Luke felt the presence touch his mind and show him visions of countless civilizations that had risen and fallen under. Watcher guidance Dr. Santos analyzed the mental contact reports and realized that the Watchers existed primarily as energy beings who had transcended physical form millions of years ago. They viewed younger species as interesting experiments in a cosmic laboratory and had been guiding galactic development according to patterns they found aesthetically pleasing. Admiral Foster watched in horror as 3 of his battleships were destroyed, without warning. The Watcher weapons simply made the human vessels cease to exist as if they had never been built. Jack realized that his fleet was completely outmatched and ordered an immediate retreat, but found that space itself had been altered to prevent escape. Captain Thompson's first contact mission became a nightmare when the Watchers demonstrated their power by instantly transporting his crew to different locations across the galaxy. Luke found himself alone on his ship facing beings who could reshape reality with a thought. The Watchers explained that they had been waiting for humanity to complete their assigned role in the current cycle. General Adams received reports that entire populations were vanishing from planets throughout Alliance space. The Watchers were beginning their harvest by collecting the most advanced individuals from each species. Patricia realized that the galaxy was being systematically stripped of its brightest minds, and most capable leaders. Dr. Maria Santos discovered that the Watchers had been manipulating the evolution of galactic civilization for eons. Every major technological breakthrough and social development had been guided by their invisible hand. The rise and fall of the Galactic Council had been just another experiment in their endless study of lesser beings. The Watchers revealed to Captain Thompson that they had created the artifacts and monitoring stations to track the progress of each galactic cycle. When a civilization reached the predetermined level of technological and social development, the harvest would begin. Luke learned that humanity's victory over the Council had been the signal that this cycle was ready for collection. Admiral Foster managed to escape the trap at the galaxy's edge, but only because the Watchers allowed him to leave. They wanted survivors to carry the message back to Alliance space that resistance was futile. Jack brought news that the approaching fleet consisted of thousands of constructs, each capable of destroying entire star systems. Dr. Santos worked with the surviving Alliance scientists to find some weakness in Watcher technology, but their methods defied all known scientific principles. The energy beings could alter matter at the quantum level and manipulate space-time like humans might reshape clay. Maria began to despair that any defense was possible. General Adams organized the evacuation of key personnel and resources from worlds in the path of the Watcher advance. Patricia knew that conventional military tactics were useless, but she refused to surrender without a fight. The Alliance military began preparing for a war they could not win, but had to fight anyway. Captain Thompson escaped from Watcher custody when his captors became distracted by more interesting subjects. Luke discovered that the energy beings were not as focused or organized as they appeared. Their immense power came with a corresponding lack of attention to details they considered unimportant. Dr. Lisa Grant joined Maria's research team and brought new insights from her study of the ancient artifacts. Lisa realized that some previous civilizations had managed to partially resist the Watchers before being destroyed. The key seemed to be finding ways to disrupt the energy patterns that gave the Watchers their power. Admiral Foster regrouped his surviving ships and began hit-and-run attacks on Watcher installations. The energy beings barely noticed these pinprick assaults, but Jack discovered that their constructs had certain vulnerabilities when focused on other tasks. Human persistence and ingenuity began to find tiny cracks in seemingly invincible defenses. The Watchers issued their ultimatum through captured Alliance communication networks. They demanded the immediate surrender of all advanced technology and the most intelligent representatives from each species. In exchange, they offered to allow primitive populations to survive as subjects for future experimentation. President Ellen Cooper addressed the Free Worlds Alliance from an undisclosed location as Watcher forces swept across civilized space. Ellen refused to accept defeat and called upon all species to unite in resistance even though victory seemed impossible. She reminded the galaxy that freedom was worth fighting for. Regardless of the odds, General Adams coordinated with resistance cells that had formed spontaneously across Alliance territory. These groups included former enemies who now worked together against the common threat. Patricia realized that the Watchers had made one crucial mistake by underestimating the determination of supposedly inferior species. Dr. Santos made a breakthrough when she discovered that the Watchers drew their power from the quantum structure of local space-time. If that structure could be altered or disrupted, the energy beings might become vulnerable to conventional attack. Maria began working on theoretical methods for quantum disruption on a galactic scale. Captain Thompson led commando raids on Watcher research facilities and discovered vast databases containing the collected knowledge of thousands of extinct civilizations. Luke found that some species had developed weapons or techniques that had troubled the Watchers before being overwhelmed. The information gave new hope to Alliance scientists. The resistance movement grew as more beings refused to accept the fate that had befallen so many previous civilizations. Admiral Foster commanded a growing fleet of ships from dozens of species, united in their determination to fight for freedom. The Watchers had expected easy submission, but instead faced defiance. From across the galaxy, Fleet Admiral Danny Clark commanded the largest military force in galactic history, as ships from hundreds of species gathered for the final battle against the Watchers. Danny had never imagined leading former enemies alongside his human fleet, but desperate times had created impossible alliances. The combined armada represented every free civilization that refused to surrender to cosmic tyranny. Dr. Rachel Kim made the discovery that changed everything when she realized that the Watchers could predict and manipulate species they had studied for millennia. But humanity's rapid evolution made them partially invisible to Watcher calculations. Rachel found that human unpredictability and refusal to follow predetermined patterns created gaps in Watcher control systems. Major Chris Johnson led elite infiltration teams into the heart of Watcher installations across the galaxy. Chris and his soldiers moved through alien structures that defied physics and challenged sanity. But they pressed forward with typical human stubbornness. The Major discovered that the Watchers kept detailed records of every civilization they had harvested. Director Sophie Turner coordinated resistance networks that spanned multiple galaxies and included species thought extinct for millions of years. Sophie learned that the Watchers' greatest weakness was their arrogance in keeping experimental subjects alive, rather than destroying them completely. Ancient civilizations had been waiting eons for a chance to strike back. The final battle began simultaneously across dozens of dimensions, as the Watchers unleashed their full power for the first time in cosmic ages. Reality itself became a battlefield, where the laws of physics shifted constantly and space folded back on itself. Admiral Clark found himself commanding fleets that existed in multiple timelines at once. Dr. Kim's quantum disruption device was deployed at the galactic core, where it began altering the fundamental structure of local spacetime. The device used principles that human scientists had discovered through pure stubbornness and refusal to accept that certain things were impossible. Rachel watched as Watcher constructs began to flicker and lose cohesion. Major Johnson's teams fought through Watcher data centers and began releasing the stored knowledge and consciousness patterns of extinct civilizations. Chris found that the Watchers had preserved their victims as information rather than allowing true death. Ancient beings awakened in digital form and joined the fight against their captors. Director Turner activated sleeper agents from civilizations that had been harvested thousands of years ago, but had maintained hidden resistance cells. Sophie's network revealed that the galaxy was full of beings who had been waiting centuries for the right moment to rebel. The Watchers faced enemies they thought were long dead. Fleet Admiral Clark coordinated attacks across multiple realities as his forces struck at the quantum foundations of Watcher power. The energy beings had grown complacent after eons of easy victories and were unprepared for enemies who refused to follow predictable patterns. Danny's human intuition guided tactical decisions that confused Watcher defense systems. Dr. Kim discovered that the key to victory was not destroying the Watchers, but fundamentally changing the nature of galactic civilization itself. Rachel's device began rewriting the cosmic conditions that had allowed the Watchers to maintain control for millions of years. The galaxy was being jailbroken from its artificial constraints. Major Johnson found the central control system that managed the cosmic cycle of rise and fall. Chris and his team fought through defenses that existed in 11 dimensions simultaneously, but human determination proved stronger than alien mathematics. The Major began the process of shutting down systems that had controlled galactic development for eons. The battle reached its climax when the Watchers attempted to restart their control systems by sacrificing the energy from an entire galaxy. Director Turner's resistance network countered by simultaneously disrupting Watcher installations across known space. The cosmic struggle became a race between creation and destruction on an unimaginable scale. Dr. Rachel Kim watched as her quantum disruption spread beyond the galactic core and began affecting the fundamental structure of the local universe. The artificial constraints that had limited civilizations for millions of years were breaking down. Rachel realized that the galaxy would never be the same, but that was exactly what needed to happen. Fleet Admiral Clark's forces pressed their attack as Watcher defenses began to fail. The energy beings were losing their ability to manipulate reality as the quantum foundations of their power crumbled. Danny coordinated the final assault on the primary Watcher collective that had orchestrated countless cycles of harvest. Major Johnson reached the core of the Watcher control system and found the consciousness patterns of beings who had been harvesting galaxies since before time had meaning. Chris faced entities that existed as pure thought and will, but human defiance proved stronger than cosmic intellect. The Major began the shutdown sequence that would end the eternal cycle. The Watchers made one last desperate attempt to maintain control by offering to share their power with humanity. They promised to make humans the rulers of multiple galaxies, in exchange for continuing the harvest system. The temptation was enormous, but the human leadership rejected the offer without hesitation. Director Sophie Turner coordinated the liberation of trillions of consciousness patterns that had been stored in Watcher databases. Ancient civilizations returned to existence in new forms, while species thought extinct for eons began rebuilding their cultures. The galaxy suddenly became far more diverse and interesting than anyone had imagined. Dr. Kim's disruption device completed its work as the last Watcher control systems went offline. The energy beings found themselves stripped of their cosmic power and reduced to just another species among many. Rachel had fundamentally altered the rules that governed galactic civilization and opened unlimited possibilities for future development. The victory celebration lasted for weeks as beings from across time and space gathered to mark the end of the cosmic cycle. Fleet Admiral Clark found himself honored by civilizations he had never heard of, while Major Johnson was thanked by species that had been extinct when humans were still primitive. Director Turner coordinated relief efforts for newly liberated. World's President Ellen Cooper stood before the reformed Galactic Assembly and announced the beginning of a new age of truly free development. The artificial limits that had constrained civilization for millions of years were gone, and species could now develop along their own unique paths. Ellen knew that humanity's greatest contribution had been breaking the cycle rather than ruling. The Galaxy Captain Jake Morrison returned to asteroid mining by choice rather than necessity. The old mining captain had started the chain of events that led to galactic freedom by simply doing his job properly. Jake found peace in the honest work, while new species emerged from previously unexplored regions to join the growing community of free civilizations. The galaxy entered an unprecedented era of cooperation and discovery, as beings worked together without the hidden manipulation that had shaped previous civilizations. The Watchers were forced to exist as equals rather than cosmic farmers, while their former victims built societies that reflected their true potential rather than artificial limitations. Dr. Lisa Grant established research stations to study the artifacts and installations left behind by the Watchers. Lisa worked to understand how the cosmic cycle had been maintained for so long and to prevent any similar system from developing in the future. Her work ensured that the galaxy's new freedom would be permanent and protected,